Greetings, everyone. This is Jed Schlackman. I'm a holistic counselor and spiritual energy healer based in Miami, Florida. In this particular video, I want to talk about our throat chakra, and I'm presenting this in the context of what people often refer to as a global awakening. So while there's a global awakening, there is simultaneously sort of a global assault on the throat chakra and communication. So with the awakening process, people are often starting to gain self-confidence and self-empowerment, speaking up and expressing their truth, whether that's through speech, through writing, through some form of entertaining, music, or art. So there's different ways people share or express their truth or communicate it. And in the current time period, a lot of people are kind of coming into their power, speaking out in ways that they might have felt afraid to before. So people are willing to challenge existing institutions and authority figures. There's a lot of corruption within those institutions, within the power or control structures of our society. So people are now more and more challenging those corrupt institutions, speaking up and speaking out about these things. Now, while that is occurring, there's the counterforce. You could think of it like yin and yang in the Taoist tradition, where there's polarities, and when one polarity expresses itself or expands itself, it also in some way triggers a reaction or a countermeasure from the other polarity. So in this case, there's a polarity that wishes to suppress speech and communication, that wishes to restrict the expression or communication of anything that might be perceived as a threat or challenge to the existing power structures. So we see both of these phenomena at work. You could look at it as the light polarity and the dark polarity, both playing out their positions. So if we think about the throat chakra, obviously we often think of our voice, of verbal communication. And here in the year 2020, what are some things that you see occurring in the public sphere and the mass consciousness? Well, we see people being told and often required to put a covering over their face, over their mouth. So in a subconscious, symbolic kind of sense, that can represent restricting your speech. Obviously, in a practical sense, it's reducing the airflow there, so it's causing people to breathe in less oxygen, less air than they normally would, and to breathe in more of their own exhalation, more carbon dioxide. So there are potential health hazards in doing that, particularly if you're doing it for a long period of time, or if you already have some form of compromise to your respiratory system or your health. So people are being forced often to wear these masks and cover their face, and there really is very little evidence of any situations or contexts where that would be beneficial. In terms of reducing transmission of microbes, what it does is it catches moisture. So if you're coughing and sneezing and you're wearing that mask, then it is catching a lot of that and restricting how much of that gets expelled. However, viruses can go right through it. The air, to some extent, is going through it, and the virus particles can go right through the material of most masks. And once it gets out into the air, it's going to continue to go with the airflow. Air isn't static. Everywhere we go, we see air is flowing. That's the nature of the air element. It doesn't stay stable or static in one place like Earth. It's in constant motion. It's very light and free. So anything that's in the air will continue to move and expand and spread. So you can't really stop the spread of those microorganisms that are associated with illnesses by wearing masks. It can have some benefit in slowing things down in certain indoor environments where people who are actually actively ill are wearing it. But other than that, it's not really doing much of significance, and it's presenting potential hazards. So that's my perspective on masks from a holistic health point of view. But in this particular video, I'm focusing more on a psychological aspect. So psychologically, when you cover your face, it can symbolize cutting off your speech or communication, and it also interferes with our observation of facial cues. Body language and facial cues are a significant part of how human beings communicate and socially relate to one another. And so if we're restricting our ability to perceive those cues, we are, in some sense at least, restricting our ability to effectively communicate. So from that psychological point of view, it's not a healthy thing to be wearing masks. Masks also represent a covering of one's true self, or a facade in a sense. People wear masks to hide their authentic self. So if we're demanding that everyone go around wearing masks, it's as though we're symbolically demanding that people not reveal their true nature or true identity, and that's also not healthy if we want to have a healthy, transparent, harmonious type of society. So we can consider all of those aspects in terms of the mask and communication, while we can also look around at another major phenomenon occurring this year that relates to communication and a somewhat global effort to restrict or suppress it, and that's censorship, particularly censorship with major tech companies and social media. So a lot of speech is being restricted in social media in terms of things like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. So people that are sharing content that challenges particular mainstream so-called official narratives are often being silenced, even if they're just presenting some scientific evidence or information that is challenging the dominant mainstream narrative. So that's occurring with some political topics. Right now it's occurring in the aftermath of the election. So if people are presenting something that challenges the projected outcome of the election, that could be censored. People are presenting information related to vaccinations, related to the nature of the coronavirus illnesses, what's causing and how to treat them. Those types of information could be censored if it contradicts or contrasts with what the mainstream health authorities or institutions are reporting to the public. So there's been kind of an unprecedented effort to censor people who are challenging those types of mainstream narratives. So you have mainstream medicine and mainstream media coordinating their efforts to keep alternative points of view from reaching the public. In reality, if there is a point of view or a perspective that's inaccurate, that's not really solidly supported by evidence, then the best way to counter that would be to allow that to be presented while you point out the flaws, the problems with that perspective. You present the clear evidence that would debunk or disprove that errant or inaccurate information. If you just censor it and suppress it, you're potentially reinforcing it by convincing the people who have that perspective that they have such an important, powerful source or form of information that's threatening the so-called status quo, that they must be onto something that's correct. You're also creating what you could call echo chambers, where there's kind of a split or division in which information sources different segments of the population are following. So you have people that rely just on the mainstream dominant sources or media outlets, and so they're just seeing their sources of information repeating that same narrative, and they're not being exposed to other points of view. So they're caught in their own echo chamber of everyone repeating the same belief or idea, and so it appears to them it must be true since that's what everyone has a consensus of in their social context. Whereas you have a separate culture or subculture or segment of society where people are looking at different information, at a different narrative, an alternative view, and they're all seeing that same view and all repeating that to one another. So that's what they're perceiving as the consensus of reality for themselves. So that creates a split where you have these different narratives, different cultures, different echo chambers that are feeding into themselves and not having much contact with one another, not giving an opportunity for dialogue or debate to occur, for people to have their views challenged, and for the, let's say, more accurate or better understanding to rise to the top, to come to show itself to everyone who's in that discussion. If you're not able to have the discussion, then you're not able to refine your knowledge or understanding. So those are a couple major phenomena to consider: the literal physical covering of the mouth and the censorship, the social efforts to cut off or restrict communication. And that's happening at this time where there is a lot of awakening, a lot of expansion of consciousness, of people breaking free of old systems of control, old power structures, archaic narratives of what is true or accurate, whether it's related to science, to history, to medicine, to current events, and so on. So people are uncovering a lot of information. They're expanding their awareness of many things that they hadn't been aware of before. And people are also speaking up about things to a greater extent than they may have previously done so. So with that speaking up about things that are challenging the existing powers, the existing paradigms, there's that backlash, that effort to hold on to control, to cut off the communication or speech that could threaten or overthrow those previous systems of power or control. This is a very interesting time to live in. These are fascinating phenomena to observe, and it's my desire to encourage those of you that are in a process of awakening to not be afraid to respectfully and clearly speak your truth, to understand that your voice is important, it's powerful, it's contributing to the evolution of consciousness, to the evolution of the human race, to your soul's evolution. So go forward and be yourself, speak your truth, seek to understand and hear others as well, no matter how much we may know or understand or be awakened to. There are always other people or other beings out there who have even greater knowledge or understanding that they can share with us, that could help us expand and grow even further in our consciousness. For now, I want to thank each of you for taking your time to view this video, to explore these subjects, to expand your consciousness. For those that are interested in holistic health and spirituality and personal growth, I invite you to view my website, which is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. For now, I wish each of you a wonderful day. Namaste.